We'll probably just give people another couple of minutes, Mr. Todd, and then we'll get started.
Agreed.
Have you got another?
Yep, just doing that now.
Number?
Oh, you want another Alan Sherman number?
Why not? For a Friday, for a Harry Fatigue Friday.
Did you notice the link there between the content of?
Yes.
Okay.
Very nice.
So let's listen to the 12 Days of Christmas by Alan Sherman, shall we?
First day of Christmas, my true love gave to me a Japanese transistor radio. On the second day of Christmas, my true love gave to me green polka dot pajamas and a Japanese transistor radio. It's a Nakashima. On the third day of Christmas, my true love gave to me a calendar book with the name of my insurance man. And a Japanese transistor radio. It's the Mark IV model. That's the one that's discontinued. On the fourth day of Christmas, my true love gave to me a simulated alligator wallet, calendar book with the name of my insurance man, green polka dot pajamas, and a Japanese transistor radio. And it comes in a leatherette case with holes in it, so you could listen right through the case. On the fifth day of Christmas, my true love gave to me a statue of a lady with a clock where her stomach ought to be. A simulated alligator wallet, a calendar book with the name of my insurance man, green polka dot pajamas, and a Japanese transistor radio. And it has a wire with a thing on one end that you could stick in your ear and a thing on the other end that you can't stick anywhere because it's bent. On the sixth day of Christmas, my true love gave to me a hammered aluminum nutcracker and all that other stuff, and a Japanese transistor radio. On the seventh day of Christmas, my true love gave to me a pink satin pillow that says San Diego with fringe all around it and all that other stuff, and a Japanese transistor radio. On the eighth day of Christmas, my true love gave to me an indoor plastic bird bath, all that other stuff, and a Japanese transistor radio. On the ninth day of Christmas, my true love gave to me
What do you think, Mr. Hutchinson, at 2 minutes past 10?
Thank you very much, Mr. Todd, for that nice time to start. So first of all, a nice warm welcome to the parents who have joined us this morning. I'm sure we will continue to have a few more parents logging in as I work through the interview. Our second Parents as Learners virtual session for this academic year. Before I introduce the session, just a couple of reminders for parents before we get any further. Obviously next week we have our parent-student teacher conferences coming up from Monday through Friday. So if you have not booked your conferences to meet with your son or daughter's homeroom teacher, advisor, and subject teachers, can you do so as soon as possible through the Meet the Teacher platform? If you've got any difficulties, please reach out to the school. Miss Nia Sari will be more than happy to help you and support you through that process. But it's really important at the end of term, communicate with your son, daughter's teachers and learn a little bit about their progress and how they can continue to improve going into term 2. A couple of other reminders. Next week, Richard, Todd and I as principal and vice principal have a pretty busy week, and we thought we'd just add to that busy week by running 3 parent sessions on Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday afternoons. So next Tuesday we have our year 7 through 9 Manage Back for Parents session, and that will start at 4:15. Then on Wednesday, for parents of students in years 9 through 13, we will have a Unifrog for Parents session, and that will start again at 4:15, and then on the Thursday, a session for students in years 10 through 13, and that's another Manage Back for Parents session on the 8th of October, 4:15. We also have next term two great initiatives by the ACG School Jakarta Community Group. Our Year 12 and 13 parent representative is organising two social events, one on Saturday the 24th of October at 10 a.m. for Year 13 parents, and the other one for Year 12 parents on Saturday the 31st of October. And it's a virtual social get-together. It's an opportunity for parents of students in years 12 and 13 to get together. We're going to talk a little bit about student wellness, and we're going to talk about how we can continue to remain connected as a community. So there's a few things coming up for us over the next few weeks. But I'd like to warmly welcome our Vice Principal, Mr. Richard Todd, who'll be running our session this morning on the value and importance of teacher feedback. It looks like a fantastic session for all of us. So please enjoy, and over to Richard.
Thank you very much, Sean. What a lovely, lovely introduction. Hope I can live up to that. Right, everybody, so welcome. Let me just give you a brief introduction to why we're offering this workshop on formative feedback and the value of it, and what we could do from this point on. Obviously, it's very much connected to our focus this year on communication. I think that everybody would agree that effective communication between all of the stakeholders in your children's education will improve the possibility of maximum progress, and that's in all areas. Okay, so we're not just talking about getting better grades, we're talking about addressing the child as a whole, feedback, communication between teacher and student, student and teacher, students and students, but really the crucial one, the teacher-student-parent relationship in terms of sharing information about your children's progress in all areas. It's absolutely central to them making improvements and basically being happier and better positioned in school. So I'm going to share my share my screen with you. Please excuse the shouts in the background. That's a local vendor walking past selling something like coconut cakes, I think. We'll see. Okay, so we're going to skip through Alan Sherman's wonderful good advice. Here it is again. Sorry about that. That was a bit loud, wasn't it? Okay, so this is what we're going to look at today. This is how we're going to roll it out. So we're going to look at the first part. What can detailed formative feedback look like? I'm going to walk you through quite slowly a very particular example. Then we're going to play a little game called Odd One Out. It's a very quick game, which will involve you reading a couple of things, and that gives me a break where I don't have to talk for about 3 or 4 minutes. And really, it's just a bit of a joke, fun session there where you look for the bad feedback and pick out the really good, useful feedback. 3, a question that is certainly asked at a teacher level. Can summative assessments also receive feedback? Because I think a lot of people think a summative assessment can only get a grade and can only be used as a full stop. So we'll talk about exceptions to that rule. Examples of both formative and summative feedback in different subjects and different year groups so that you can get a bit of a wider picture. And then the intriguingly titled section 5, giving feedback to John Lennon. I'll save that for the moment until we get to that slide. And we're going to talk about hindsight a little bit, and then we're going to do the credits, and then we should have some time for a Q&A session. All right, okay, I'm just going to minimize my... I'm going to try and minimize my window. I can't do it. Okay, so I might miss out a few words because I've got pictures of all of you covering some of my text and I can't seem to get rid of it. Okay, so formative feedback for learning. So this is why we give students feedback during the process, so that they can increase their understanding and their knowledge and their skills and processes and techniques. So here's the basic thing, is that while you're going through a unit of study, when you know what it is basically you're studying, you've had your introduction, there will be new skills and processes that your child is exposed to and asked to learn and attempt. And as they do this, the only way that they can understand where they're at is by getting tailored feedback. And by that, I mean it's particular to the subject, it's particular to the skills, it's particular to the processes, and it's particular to the child. Now, you can do this in all subject areas. My example, because my teaching experience is predominantly in visual arts, so I'm going to go through an example here from year 12. Now, grades were also given as a guide for students for this formative feedback, but they were not used to get a grade at the end of the semester. They were guideline grades. We can have another meeting where we talk about grades and how the notion of grades changes during an exam program like the DP. But they need to know in like year 12, for example, they know that they're going to be examined at the end of year 13. So they have to know how they're making progress against those eventual exit criteria. So what you're looking at here, if you look on under the word comments, you'll see the letter A, C, D, and E. Now those are strands of criteria and assessment objectives of students in visual arts at year 12 and 13. So we've been, in this example, working on a task, which is to develop ideas for a piece of work. And this is the feedback that I gave to a particular student last year. The first part in black, where it says A, the work demonstrates, that is direct from the assessment objectives. So what we're looking for in strand A is the work demonstrates experimentation, manipulation of skills, techniques, processes, and selection of materials. Now I've said there are only a few sketches here. So to improve, I suggest that you show experimentation with camera, angles, lighting, editing for color, and form composition. So that's my very specific feedback about how that student should be researching or experimenting in their process journal for visual arts. So that's ongoing. You've given me your book, you know what it is I'm looking for, and on that strand, this is where you're falling short a bit. So what I suggest you do is this. Then I do the same with C. Strand C is about your ideas and what it is you intend to do. And now I've got rid of a few, I'm very sorry. I got rid of a few identifying words here. So that's why you're looking at redactions. I've said that, well, if you think that this thing that you're doing is exciting, then your process work should show how you are trying to use exciting compositions, exciting colors, blah, blah, blah. And so I'm referring to a conversation in class as well. This is the connection between meaning and the visual elements of the artwork that I was talking about in class. So that's another way to feedback in a formative sense. You're referring the student back to something you already covered in class. I think you need to go and think about this again. And incidentally, in a lot of cases, feedback like this that's written will come after a conversation between a student and a teacher. So they're getting it, they get it in the lesson. They know what it is they're supposed to be doing ongoing. They'll get a conversation with feedback as we look through the books together, and then they'll get a written version as well. And we move on to criterion D, which is all about reviewing and refining in the visual arts. Now, this is really crucial, this strand. Honestly, I think that reviewing and refining should be an assessment objective in all of the courses at all of the ages, because that essential skill of I'm looking back at what I've done, I'm reviewing to see how what I did was effective, and then I'm refining certain bits of it that fall a bit short of the required standard. So I've given the students some notes here. I've said there's very little evidence of reviewing, refining, and reflecting. And in your journal, that would be present in notes such as, and I've written an example. So that's a really good way to give a student feedback. Give them an example. It could be a previous student's example for a generic approach. But in this case, I've given a very specific example. I've said, I tried to use a very ordered composition, but it had no impact on making the work exciting. So I moved everything around, messed it up. So basically I was saying, if I were you, I would have written something like this because I know that's what you were trying to do. So it's like scaffolding. It's like helping students understand this is the kind of language that should be used. Now in my subject in particular, many students are not used to using approaches like this because many subjects, and I'm not talking about teaching styles here, I'm talking about subjects and the way they're laid out, are quite content heavy and they don't really demand thinking outside of the box. Art does. I mean, I think that all of the subject courses, they really should be focused on tangential thinking, but they're not necessarily. But in art, you know, they've got to step up to the plate and play with some ideas and be ambitious with how they can make improvements and play, basically. So that's what I'm talking about there, through the lens of reviewing, refining, and reflecting. In this subject is about use of language and presentation. And I've said there's some inaccuracies here. You are using some art language, but by doing more experimentation with the elements and the principles, learn the words and use them in your notes. So you can see, without going on about this slide for any longer, each of the strands has been addressed. This is a major piece of formative assessment and feedback given to a student approximately halfway to 2/3 of the way through the process, so that they can then go away. And I'm not going to ask them to change everything that's already happened. I'm going to ask them to use this information to inform, there's that word form again, to inform the next time they go into their process journal, next time they play with ideas and make notes and experiment with media, they should be addressing these pieces of advice. So that's kind of like I'm feeding you some information, and now we're going to play a little game here. So I've called it, let's play odd one out. And on the next slide, there are 3 examples of feedback. These are, again, visual arts ones, because that's where obviously most of my examples, it's where I've got most of my resources. I'm going to ask you to look at 3. 2 of them are really good examples of feedback. At least I hope they are. I wrote them and I think they're quite good. But one of them is pretty useless. This is a very, very, very tricky test, so be careful. That's me being sarcastic. So have a look at this. Let's read through at your leisure. I don't want to talk over the top. So have a couple of minutes looking at this. Now, obviously, I don't know all of you lovely people in detail, but I'm going to take a random guess and think that maybe you sussed out pretty quickly which one of these pieces of feedback was less helpful than the other 2. Does anybody want to play my game with me and tell me which is the odd one out?
I want to play Richard. Can I please me?
Yes, well, you didn't put your hand up, Mr. Slusher, but yes, okay. Then.
Sorry, my bad. I forgot the hand icon thing.
So go on, go for it.
I would say it's in the picture, I think, was what made it difficult. The picture straight across the screen, because I thought it was that, because it didn't even say anything. But it's right after the picture one.
You're talking about the yellow quote, like the quote highlighted
Correct.
in yellow, right? Yeah, exactly.
Correct.
I mean, obviously, this is a bit of a tongue-in-cheek, having a bit of a giggle. But to be honest, I mean, I remember when I was at school, literally last century, obviously, and I remember even on my school reports, I would get things like C+ did quite well. That would be on a report. That's not a formative piece of assessment for a unit or a piece of work. That would be at the end of a school semester or year. Did quite well, or excellent, well done. And it's nice, but it's incredibly shallow. So that's what the yellow one is. I'm telling the student nothing here. I'm saying excellent work. Actually, it's even worse than that, because I am telling them there's something wrong, but I'm not giving them any guidance about how to improve that. Because if what we're looking at is perspective drawing, then tell the student what was wrong and how they can improve it. The other ones, obviously, you know, I'll make this presentation available to you. You can read these at your leisure, because there's some voluntary extra work to do if you would like to read further. But obviously the first one, I'm covering quite a few bases there in the pink one. I'm saying what does and doesn't make sense, and I'm making suggestions about how you can amend that. And I'm making references to particular artists, and then asking some questions about what they could maybe do. The bottom one, same thing. And here's the thing as well about when you're dealing with secondary students, secondary age students, I am definitely of the opinion that you should not dumb down your language when you're working with young people. You can use words like veracity, and if they don't know, what we want to create in a classroom situation is the confidence to say, I'm sorry, I don't know what that word means. What does it mean? So we want curiosity, we want checking, we want asking questions. So yes, I will use my vocabulary and my terminology and my expressive use of language to the best of my ability, and I will help them understand it, because I think that's all part of the learning process as well. Okay, so moving on to feedback in summative situations. And so what I'm saying here, because summative assessments more often than not come in the form of a grade, a letter grade or a number grade or a percentage at the end of a unit. And in many cases, it won't really make sense to give feedback. For example, if you've done a multiple choice test where you pick the answers, there's not a lot of formative assessment feedback that you can give, other than maybe go and revise those topics a bit more. But that's not really formative feedback, that's general advice anyway. But in some situations, for example, here's one in visual arts where a student has finished a piece of work, but obviously in something like visual art, the skills and the processes and the techniques, a lot of those, especially in the development of an idea and the exploring of media, for example, those things are part and parcel of every time you want to make something. So that creative process is something you can always give feedback on. So I've made some comments here about the piece of work. I've said it's got graphic clarity and it shows aspects of the original idea, but it's underdeveloped. You need to play more. So playing with ideas, that's definitely something you can look at a piece of work and say, all right, I think, you know, there's this and there's this, but it's obvious you still need to play more, right? Less planning, more playing. That's a piece of advice that comes around. It's perennial. Technical skills, I can always say that at the end of a piece of work. Look at these particular technical skills, and even if in the next piece of work you're making, let's say, a watercolor painting, I think you need to spend more time on technical skills. So that's a way in which, and you can imagine that if you're doing a lab in science, for example, if your preparation in general wasn't very good, then you'd say, well, I think that preparation is an area where you need to go and look at these steps again, go and look at these processes again, maybe work with one of your friends and do a little mock lab, something like that. So it's certainly not just visual art, but after a piece of work has been finished, you can still give helpful, formative feedback. Okay, I've got a little bit of an interactive session here that I think I want you to pick one of these examples. I've said look at these two, but I don't want you to do that immediately. I want you to pick up one. And I would like you, please, let's say I'll give you 5 minutes for this, and I'll put some music on in the background, maybe some more Alan Sherman, but that might be a bit distracting. Have a look at these two examples, and what I'd like you to do is try and isolate the phrases that are specifically helpful. Now, the reason I'm doing this, I was talking with Francis at the beginning, just before we started the workshop, and we were talking about it. If this workshop helps you know a little bit more about what to look for in the comments that you're seeing on ManageBack, because as Francis said, sometimes it's difficult to get information out of your children about what happened at school today. Nothing, can't remember, because my 3 kids were exactly like that, so I know that that doesn't change. But it should be somewhat helpful to you if you've had a little bit of experience, even during this short workshop, where you can look for examples of things that are specifically helpful. Then the most sensible thing to do is look at how they are helpful. So is it advice about technical skills? Is it content knowledge suggestions? Am I offering advice on materials, for example? Or is it about attitudes and dispositions? So I'm going to give you 5 minutes, and while you're doing that, I'm going to look at these questions. I think some questions have appeared in the chat. Please let me, I'm going to try and put some music on. No, I don't think I can do it. All right, so I'm going to give you 5 minutes. It's 10:27, so at 10:32, I will interrupt you and see what you've picked out. Okay. Oops. No, let me just go back there. Beg your pardon. Okay. I hope you're all still with me. I think we're on 10:32. We are. And I'm going to ask for a bit more student slash parent involvement. Is there any brave, giving soul out there who would like to share their ideas, their observations with what they found within one of these two pieces of feedback? Don't all rush at once.
Richard,
Yeah.
Nick Duda here. On the first example, I thought maybe, too many ideas to go missing like that. And that's probably more to do with attitude and disposition advice.
Right.
Probably completely wrong. The second one is notes of minimal. Make sure you keep on transferring this info into your process slides so your journey is recorded in an appropriate way.
Yeah.
Again, that's probably maybe, I don't know, as technical skills or attitudes and disposition advice.
It's both. You're correct. Yes, agreed. It's relatively simple, I think. Do you agree, Nick, that it's not as scary to try and understand? I mean, I always liked giving very precise feedback when I was classroom teaching. But even if you're coming to this and you know nothing about the language of visual arts study, I think we can all start to recognize these things if we know what we're looking for. Do you agree?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Yeah. Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to offer some observations on either the first one or the second one? Well, I think, you know, as I say to my students, then that either means that my internet connection has gone down or I explained it too well, if there's no questions or no observations. Mr. Hutchinson, you've got a student, a child who's a student in visual arts. Do you feel comfortable with pointing out a couple of things you recognized in these notes?
Sure, Richard, I can point that out, I guess. So I think it just, in reference to the second one, I think it's clearly pointing out some things that need further development. So notes are very minimal. And then it goes on to explain, make sure you keep up with transferring this info into your process slides. So it's being very specific about how to expand on those notes.
Yep, agreed. And if you look down, I put this one in deliberately. If you look down at the bottom, I've given specific content knowledge suggestions here. So I've said, go look at these artists, right? So when you do things like that, it expands what it is the students have at their disposal as a resource. And again, these kind of pieces of advice, you can transfer these into different subject settings. I'm hearing a lot of interesting noises. I wonder if is somebody trying to speak to me? Don't think so. Okay. And now I'm going to skip through the next slide because it's another version of this. And like I say, when we finish the workshop and you would like to get a copy of this, I'll make it available to you in PDF form, and you can have a look at the other examples if you would wish to. That's the one. Okay, so I'm just going to scoot through some of these examples here. This is an example from a year 11. I'm sorry, the number 11 is missing. I actually put that in 3 times. I don't think Keynote likes me very much. So this is from a year 11 class. Now the style of this feedback is very different, but it's very direct and it's very, very helpful, pointing out particular uses of language in different situations, making word suggestions which should spur the student on to think synonyms, to think how do I look for alternative ways to describe this, a little bit of justifiable praise, and then what you could have done more. And these things are transferable in the study and the practice of using the English language. I think you could have done more with exploration of that last point. So that student's going to walk away from that particular piece of feedback thinking, right, I know the things that I need to have a look at. I need to be careful about particular words and being very precise, and I need to explore ideas and points a little bit more fully. We've got an example from a year 9 design tech class, and I've highlighted here in red, you use annotations within your work, also making it clear to the viewer, so there's justifiable phrase, saying this is a thing that you are doing well, so by implication, keep doing it. Try to show how your information would work in your design, so that's a direct appeal for this is what you need to do. The more research you find allows for more development within your designs, and then a a piece of technical, it's almost a direction. Well, it is a direction. Always use the Scamper technique. So that's obviously you've missed out on this. You know you've got to do this, so don't leave it out in future. So different age levels, different classes. Now this is a really simple, small piece of feedback, but it's good feedback. So this is to a year 8 Mandarin student. So praise, you've never done this before, but this is great, well done. For the translation part, you need to have a look at this and the paragraph and the new words If you don't understand, come and ask me. So there's a direction there. Go and look at this. Obviously, you know, these are all quite different, and the teacher styles are quite different. I'm showing you these because I want to help you know what to look for, and to ask your children, do you know how to change that 4 to a 6? Do you know how to change that D to a C in that particular area? Because feedback is the answer, and we want students to know the answer. Yeah, so even down in kindergarten, in fact, especially down in kindergarten, we've all done it. We can remember when we were very young and we're trying to put one block on top of another. And if you can't remember doing that yourself, I'm sure you can remember with your children. Yeah, this is how you hold that block. Move a little bit closer. Oh, you better be careful. Don't push that one. This is feedback, and we do it from day one, and there's no reason why it should stop at any point, okay? Because it never becomes just study harder, okay? So here's the feedback. So here's the praise. Absolutely amazing. What a superstar. This is kindergarten, right? You've got to, you wouldn't really be speaking like that to a year 13 kid unless there was something terribly wrong. I can see that you understand how to count and make groups of objects to match a number. And then here's a piece about, and remember, advice and feedback depends on what was expected, and it depends on the age, it depends on the understanding of English. But here, what they're talking about when this teacher is saying, you can finish your work anytime, and you don't always need to finish it. Obviously, you wouldn't say that at year 11 to an exam student who's about to do an IGCSE, but you would say it to a KG student where it's much more about process than it is about product. All right, so it's learning to understand what constitutes good feedback within the context. Okay, and here's one more example.
You know, there are many different kinds of fictional stories. So analyzing those stories and finding out what they have in common is a really good strategy to help you understand what elements separate these kinds of stories. So for example, the elements that are for the myth are going to be slightly different than the elements of a legend. So when you know these elements, you'll be able to understand the difference and identify them correctly. Well done. Thank you.
So as I've said in my notes on the right-hand side, it's obvious what the teacher is doing. They're responding with audio feedback this time because it doesn't have to be written. It could be a video. It could be audio. It could be, of course, written is the most common one. But after the students' efforts, which were in turn in response to something that had been taught in class, identifying different types of literature, that was what was being asked to do. So then the teacher is going back and they're using communication over the internet to say, yeah, well, if you remember when we did that in class, we did this, so this is what you need to do now. So taught skills, the original taught skills processes and content are being referred back to there and commented on. Oops, I beg your pardon. There we go. All right, okay, this is one of my favorite moments. So please see if you can hear what John Lennon says in this clip. If you can't, I've got it transcripted on the next slide. But this is about accidental feedback from strangers, and it wasn't even intended. So this is, it's of course, excuse me, this is not pure formative feedback. But I just want to raise your awareness about how students can, if they're aware, if they are open, they can pick up suggestions and advice in different directions to go in with their work and with their learning, if they're just open and aware and engaged with the process of being alive on a day-to-day basis and wondering, I wonder how I can make these things better. So this is John Lennon talking about that very thing.
I don't know what I actually do with the thoughts, but they come out either on film or on paper or on tape. I've just got lots of tape, which I suppose if I put onto paper, it'd be a book. But it's just a matter of, do I want to make those tapes into paper or make the tapes into records?
Does it feel the same to you when you're writing something on paper and when you're writing a song, Derek?
It does now. In the old days, I used to think of songwriting was this, you know, and I love you and you love me, and my writing was something else, you know, even if I didn't think of it quite like that. But then I just realized through Dylan and other people, Bob Dylan, not Thomas, and that it is the same thing, you know. That's why I didn't realize, being so naive, that you know, you don't write pop songs and then you do that and then you do that. That everything you do is the same thing, so do it the same way.
I really do enjoy that clip. Okay, so this is what he's saying here, but the question is, you know, do you approach your writing that isn't lyric writing and lyric writing, songwriting, do you approach it in the same way? And what he's saying is that it occurred to him by this accidental, unsolicited feedback from Bob Dylan, not Thomas, Dylan Thomas, that, yeah, actually this comes from the same place and I shouldn't make these arbitrary divisions between these two kinds of writing because that seems a little bit too restrictive. So even John Lennon gets feedback. So these are the lyrics to the song Good Advice that we were playing at the beginning of the workshop. I'd never heard of Alan Sherman before 3 days ago, to be honest with you. And I was I like looking for songs. I used to do this with students to introduce units of study. I like to play them a list of songs that relate to the main concept in a unit. So this is, it must be from the 50s, a young man called Alan Sherman, a song called Good Advice. And he ends with helping Christopher Columbus find the West Indies there, which of course is it's satirical, it's funny, but it tells you a lot about hindsight, and formative feedback is really a little bit of a sneaky, it's a sneak peek into hindsight ahead of time. It's like, this is, you know, this is what you would kick yourself for in 2 weeks if you know, if you didn't do it. So I'm going to tell you now, this is what you could do to improve. Because hindsight's great, but it doesn't help you at the time. Okay, so there's my list of credits there, because you've got to give you credits. I've used other people's materials without permission, but that's fine because there's educational purposes and no copyright infringement was intended. So, so that's that. I'm going to stop the sharing. I'm going to exit the program. And here we are back together again. It's 10:47. And I'm going to open it up for a little bit of conversation. Any questions, observations? If you're wondering who these three people behind me are, they're my three children when they were much less expensive. They're all at university now. They were a lot cheaper then. Doug, you've got your hand up. Good boy. What can I do for you?
Yeah, this might be a little off topic, but I think it's still regarding all the feedback that teachers provide and so on. So I know that you were talking various different levels of classes, but for those going in from the primary to the secondary, as in one of my kids, one of the things I noticed that is challenging is the feedback is great from the teachers, right?
Yeah.
But I think the one thing that's challenging is for them interpreting it going into that next level of middle school.
Yeah.
And what advice do you have? Because I know parent-teacher conferences are coming up, right? And the whole idea is to listen to the teachers, and they're doing their job. And I think from the parent standpoint, as you're giving this kind of feedback to the kids at that age, what can we do as parents to sort of help guide them on, first of all, their study habits? I don't think they've ever really learned how to study. So when you do give feedback, how much do they really absorb? And this might all be off topic for today's discussion, but I think it's relevant, right?
Yeah, 100% it is. Yeah.
So for study habits to feedback to implementation, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
So that's sort of my question.
Okay. All right. Mr. Hutchinson, you okay if I just take this one? Okay. So I'm going to pick up on one particular thing that you said that I want to disavow you of this belief. You said, I know we're supposed to go and listen to the teacher. Well, listening to what the teacher says is definitely important, but we're trying really, really hard this year to make sure that people know that we understand, and this will answer your question for sure. This is all about a conversation, because we're focusing this year on communication, effective communication, and effective communication is useful, right? That parent, student, teacher conference, and it is a conference, it's not you listening to the teacher, it's the three main stakeholders in that conversation sharing information with each other. Now, it's a 20-minute block this year, so there is a definite emphasis on the teacher being in a position to give you some information about the kind of formative feedback occasions that have been happening. So we're trying to get people moving away from talking about numbers, for example, or grades, right? Of course they matter at the end, of course they do. And learning habits and study habits, all of them absolutely crucial. But your point about children engaging and taking comments on board, in my experience, the only way that you can maximize the chance of that happening is if children are engaged in an engaging conversation. That's the only way it can happen. So how do parents help with that? Engage your children in engaging conversations about the engaging conversations that are happening in the school situation. Now, I'm not saying we're there, right? We're not where we want to be. We're trying really hard, and I think we've made a lot of progress this year already in terms of communication. And we've got to keep pressing that and make sure that we all are doing our utmost in every different nook and cranny of this business called teaching, of helping students be more engaged and understand more about where they're at and how to get to that next stage. It might sound like simplistic advice. Engage your children in engaging conversations about, so tell me what was interesting about that thing. I mean, you know how to speak to your kids, right? I'm not going to tell you how to speak to your children.
Yeah, no, and that makes sense. Sorry, let me just sort of interact there for just one moment. Yep. I absolutely agree. What I meant by listening to the teachers or to the advisors, teachers, whatever, what I meant was opening that dialogue, that two-way communication, and including with the kids. And Sean, you and I have talked about this many times, but no, absolutely, the involvement in all different angles, and not just making it about the numbers, and not in making it interesting. And if they're not having very much fun, figure out how to make it fun. I get all that. I think you answered the question. It's the learning process. You know, it's year nine, I believe. Anyway, as they go through there, they're not going to take it all in that first year, but it's gradually making it through those 3 years. So as they get into the higher levels of year 10, 11, 12, and 13, it becomes more of a routine. And as you were talking with some of these examples, to me, that hits hard because I'm thinking, man, it's going to be so nice when my children are there. But right now it's really challenging because of online, and as you've said. But no, what you've said is exactly what I want to hear. Because, yeah, the grades are concerning, but the whole point is if you only focus on the grades, at our scenario right now with our particular situation, you know, you could lose it all, right? And so I just want to make sure that we're all clear.
Yeah, you're 100% right, Doug. Look, if we're looking, let's say we're standing outside a beautiful house. In fact, in the picture behind me, look at those beautiful Thai houses. Look at those beautiful roofs. Those roofs are not going to stay where they are looking great if the foundations and the structure underneath are weak. right? And the formative feedback, those conversations between students and students, students and teachers, teacher and home, that awareness, that formative is it's the foundations, it's the building. The exams are the roof, right? And pretty roofs are great, but you need the foundation. So that's what we're focusing on, trying to make improvements in that area. Sean, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I won't, because I'm conscious of time and I want to give parents an opportunity to ask any questions that they have, Richard. So
Okay.
I'll stay out of it for now.
You are a parent as well, though. That's another.
Yeah.
Sure. But I'll give others an opportunity because.
Yeah, and it answered everything for me, so that was good. So I'll close off at this point. Thanks.
Any more for any more? All comers, all questions. I'm here, and you can send questions on. Yes, Intan.
Okay, I just want to share that so far, looking at I've been monitoring a lot the managed back responses given to my children, and I find them very, very helpful, because then I'm actually able to call out my children and say, like, look, these are the things. For example, like for English, it's very structured in terms of the text structure, the vocabulary, the punctuation. So it's always step by step, and I find that very helpful. Yeah. So please keep continuing. I have no experience about younger children, only from year 9 to year 13 kind of thing. So because otherwise you will ask them like you say, like, how's school and what happened to that paper, and they say, oh, everything is fine and dandy. Oh, I do not know, maybe if there's something that I forgot or something that I didn't fill out.
Yeah.
But the guidance in terms of where exactly went wrong. So that's why I really rely on the managed back responses. And then I can actually say that, okay, these are the things that the teacher was saying that you were lacking. For example, you forgot to apply a certain formula, whatever. If you don't really understand this, can you please go back to Miss Pickering, or you sit with Mr. Abraham, whatever, and they say, okay. And then I actually sit on them then. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much for saying that, Intan, because you've reminded me, you've made clear really why we like managed back. It's got its drawbacks, but one of the main reasons we like managed back as a school is because it forces transparency, right? Everything is there. You can't hide anything on managed back. Well, I mean, I suppose it can be a little bit unwieldy to use sometimes, but all the information is there. It's all there. So nothing in terms of feedback, nothing in terms of grades is on a day-to-day basis hidden from sight, obviously. So, you know, warts and all, our strengths and our weaknesses, it's all there to see. And we have to, as a school, we have to use these transparent yardsticks, benchmarks to get better. I mean, it's the only point in going back week after week, term after term, year after year. That's the only reason, isn't it, to see if we can get a bit better at what we're doing. And yeah, I think managed back will prove to be invaluable in helping us do that. And we want to encourage parents to be on there a lot more, students to be on there a lot more, because there wasn't a culture of using managed back last year particularly. I found it quite difficult to get kids. I'm writing messages and it's managed back is sending them emails, and nobody's getting back to me because they're not checking their email and they're not checking managed back. So we've got to try and build that culture from the bottom up. But yeah, I mean, yeah, you're right. It's a very open window, is managed back, and we want people to use it. It's 10:59. I can't see any more burning questions in the chat box. I'll tell you what I'm going to do next, though. I'm really grateful to all of you for coming along. It's great attendance, 22 today, including Mr. Sean, because he is a parent. So 22 people, that's great. I'm going to make sure that Miss Mia helps me get the PDF of this. I'll send you the links to the John Lennon and the Alan Sherman. I won't be sending you music and video files. I'll send you the PDF so that you can have a look at all of this stuff in the at your own leisure, in the comfort of your own home. And please just send me any questions at any time. There's last minute question from Michael. Why is mathematics late in the afternoon for year 4? Okay, I'll take that question, and we'll see what we can find out about the positioning of maths classes in primary school, Michael, and get back to you. Thank you for that question. Can't answer it right now. Febby, were you trying to speak just there? No? Okay. All right, well, in that case, as principal, Mr. Sean, would you like to wrap up?
I would. Thank you very much, Richard, for your session this morning. And really, the main purpose of Parents as Learners workshops is to try and encourage us all to engage in conversation and discussion about some of these topics. Formative feedback and formative assessment hasn't been a strong part of discussions through the school, and it is very much the foundations in which to build upon. So I hope that as parents, when you go into your parent-student-teacher conferences next week, you're hearing from the teachers examples of how formative feedback has led to your students' progress in a particular area. And that's really critical. As a school, we want to see students progressing and improving. And so we need to be able to provide them with very specific feedback so that they can take that on board. And I've written down engagement as something that we need to also talk about. Intan, you're right. Engaging in meaningful conversation with your son and daughter, referring to manage back feedback, is such a useful thing to do. So if you've got time next week, join our manage back sessions on Tuesday and Thursday afternoon. Wednesday afternoon, we've got UniFrog for those of you who have got students looking at careers and university options. Thank you very much again, Richard, for your preparation and presentation. Thank you for attending this morning, ladies and gentlemen. We will get a recording as well as the presentation out to you very, very soon. That's all from us. Stay safe, everyone, and enjoy your week of conferences next week. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Mr. Hutchinson. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.